October 10th, 2023, late afternoon, we are after a 2-hour conference where we talked about countering Hamas, uniting against terrorism. The whole world saw what happened a few days ago in Israel, where innocent people, old people, kids were slaughtered by terrorists. So in a very short notice, we were able to put together this conference. We're working together here with two great people, and I would like to introduce them to you. Patricia Teitelbaum, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Chair of Impact, and Nigel, CEO of Impact. We put together this conference. They brought together over 15 MEPs, almost 20 MEPs from major political groups in the European Parliament, many experts, and testimonies from Israel. And I would like to give them the floor to explain a little bit about what their organization does, and to touch base on what we'll discuss today, and then I will close the remarks and give the opportunity to journalists to ask any questions. Patricia.
Thank you. Well, International Movement for Peace and Coexistence, our organization based in Brussels, aims to build bridges with people who normally wouldn't talk to each other. We try to build a future of a society where you can coexist together and where the differences would be solved by words and not by acts. So when we saw Saturday what happened in Israel was so terrifying. Hamas is characterized as a terrorist organization. Everybody says so. But behind these words of saying Hamas is a terrorist organization, we have the impression that the world just continue to give money to them, to accept them, and to say, yes, they have maybe a military organization in themselves, but the others are okay. But nothing is okay in Hamas, because what we have seen, slaughtering people, raping girls, beheading babies, taking hostages of grandmothers, I mean, this is like ISIS. So we cannot remain silent. We cannot.
Thank you so much. Nigel?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. We were shocked, like everybody was, every decent person, to see what happened on Saturday. And yes, we had to do something. And I would like to say that I am not personally against Palestinians. I have Palestinian friends. We have been to the West Bank. We know people who live there. We know people who live in Gaza. We want the best for them. But what happened on Saturday was it was more than a step too far. It takes things to an entirely new level, doesn't it? No Israeli that I know has ever said to me they would take pleasure in beheading Palestinian children. And yet that is precisely what happened when Hamas terrorists took pleasure in beheading Israeli children. There's something wrong here, something fundamentally wrong. Our organization is all about dialogue. As Churchill said, it's all very well to stand up to be counted, but do you have the courage to sit down and talk with each other? Dialogue is a foundation of coexistence, of democracy, of living together. Of course it is. But sometimes you have to call it straight. There is no such thing as moral ambiguity. Things are right or wrong, they are black or white. You have to take sides. The side that we take today is a side of humanity, not the side of evil. We heard in our conference, didn't we, a testimony after testimony from people in Israel about the horrific things that had happened to their loved ones. I woke up yesterday morning when I was planning this conference to learn that a friend of mine had been murdered. I'll mention his name, Bernard Cohen, born in Glasgow in Scotland, made Aliyah years and years ago with his wife. They built a new life. They brought up 3 children. A more lovely man you would never meet. And yet he was murdered. Why? Because he was a Jewish Israeli. Not that that religion makes any difference to Hamas. So the second thing I would want to say is this. We all agree that the aims of Hamas are wicked and pernicious. I'm sure of that. And yet, many people here in Europe support what Hamas do. There are people here who are proxies of Hamas. They work for and have set up NGOs, which are the arm of Hamas. They applaud the actions we saw of Hamas on Saturday. They want to promote it. They want to endorse it. They want to enlarge it. And it is against these NGOs and their leaders, many of them who are listed in Israel as terrorists, that I would wish the European Union to take action by prescribing them and making it impossible for them to live, work and have their being on our continent. And this is what we would like to see happen next week in plenary, in a resolution in Strasbourg, in the European Parliament.
Thank you so much. I started my speech today. Thank you. I started my speech today during the conference presenting the cover of a literature book that is used for the 5th grade in Arab schools. And this is what they see on one of the pages. More than likely, many Europeans have no idea who this, when you look at her, is a lovely lady, right? Well, this person, here's another image of her. Wikipedia, for example, is describing her as a militant, as a Palestinian militant. Her name is Dalal Mughrabi. This lady, in 1978, along with other militants, actually terrorists, hijacked buses in Tel Aviv, buses with innocent civilians, with kids, with people who went to work, who came for work, or who went to visit their families. These buses were hijacked, and many people in those buses were killed. 38 people were killed by the commando, this terrorist commando, led by this woman. Among the 38 people killed, there were 13 children. That happened in 1978. We are today in 2023. So imagine now that in 2023, kids, Palestinian kids, Arab kids, either in West Bank or in Gaza, they are taught in school that their role model is not an intellectual, is not a, a civic militant, but this. So imagine how raising your kids in an environment where they go to school and instead of learning how to read, how to count, they learn how to hate and how to kill. So what we saw Saturday in Israel is the result of decades of ignorance, especially from Western powers. Because they gave money without accountability. Nobody asked until recently what happened with the money given to the Palestinian Authority. Was the money actually used to teach kids or to indoctrinate kids on how to hate and even worse, how to kill? Not only how to kill, but why to kill. Imagine when you grow up in an environment where you don't have many options and you go to a school financed with EU's money and you read these books, and instead of reading stories of love, of respect, you read stories of hating another person. Not only that, but if you kill a Jew, and after you kill the Jew, if you are killed, then you go straight to heaven, where tens of virgins are going to wait for you. So what we saw happening a few days ago in Israel is the result of this indoctrination, not education. Because when people are educated, you don't see this kind of stuff. And I want to thank the representatives of this wonderful organization, Impact. As Patricia said, this is the time and the moment, I would say, in our history. Because at the end of the day, each one of us is part of history. Every day, it's another historical page, I would say, ahead of us as well as behind us. So, in a matter of hours, we were able to put together this conference and get experts from Israel, get testimonies from people who's, we had this girl, it was unbelievable. She was explaining us how her grandmother was kidnapped by these terrorists, and they saw her image online. So now imagine if any of you have a grandmother. You usually look at her picture, right? Or you call her. So imagine now seeing that image with your grandmother on someone's bike being taken in Gaza. People laughing, and screaming around her. Imagine the kind of, feeling that you might have. There are thousands of families, Jewish families, that have to go through this, which is not okay. Going forward, I'm sure that the Israeli government will do what it has to be done to resolve the terrorist cells over there. But this is the time when we have to look back and maybe think and double think. If there was something that could have been done 6 months ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, to avoid what we saw happening on Thursday. And I think there is. And the first thing that we need to emphasize, and I'm speaking right now from a perspective of an MEP, we need to have transparency and accountability on how the money given to these people is spent. Money does not always solve the problem. Sometimes it's enhancing the same problems. Because you cannot just give money to someone that is using the money for evil purposes and then expect good results. We just saw that happen on Saturday. The second thing that we need to do is to understand that you should never ever compromise your principles with evil and with the devil. Because that's what it is. We need to have the courage in 2023, exactly like Ronald Reagan had the courage in the 80s, to define and to name the Soviet Union as an empire of evil. We also have to have the courage nowadays, a political courage, to call the evil the way it is. We got to this point because for many years, generations now, weak leaders, for small gains, they compromised on principles. And this is where we are. Because people do not know anymore what right and wrong is. Our job, I would say, especially that in 2024 we'll have Euro parliamentarian elections, we need to make sure that we have in all the offices strong leaders who are not afraid to fight the good fight, defend the right, and call out the evil. Thank you.
Very good. Herman Kelly is my name. I'd like to ask if any journalists here, either in the room here or online, if they'd like to put up their hand and identify themselves, please.
Technology, you know how it is. Everything was done on such a short notice. And but if it's not working, he can send us questions in writing, or we can call him and ask the questions.
Yeah, do you want to see the question? You're trying to ask the question. Do you want to ask the question? What do you want to ask me the question?
Put it on speaker.
Okay, I'll put you on speaker.
No, put on speaker and next to the mic.
Okay. Speak away there, Christian. Tig.
Okay, am I coming through there?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Right, so first off, I would just like to ask about the Commission's reaction to the crisis on Saturday, in which we had Commissioner Varhelyi initially calling for the cutting off of funding towards Palestinian authorities. And at first he seemed to think he had the authority to do this, but he has been pushed back again. I'm just wondering if you think, are there innate problems in the EU that prevent it from taking decisive action when it's needed, and has perhaps even led to this current situation where the EU, I believe there was one saw one parliamentary question a while back where it confirmed that the EU is sending something in the sum of millions to a Gaza Strip school that was founded by a Islamist. So I'm wondering, does the structure of the EU itself, what are the problems in the EU that A, caused this, led to this problem, and B, are they continuing to cause a weak response on the part of the EU?
I just confirm that was Tig Pigeon from Brussels Signal Media.
Shall I?
Yeah.
Well, only people have moral clarity. Organisations cannot have moral clarity. And it seems to me that Commissioner Varhelyi has absolutely crystal clear moral clarity about this. And High Commissioner, High Representative Borrell has a different kind of clarity. We don't support his pronouncements at all. We think they are confused, slightly duplicitous, call into question the words that he issued over the weekend in support of Israel's right to self-defense. There is no doubt that money, millions of euros of taxpayers' money from Europeans, is misappropriated by NGOs, by Hamas operatives and administration members in the Gaza Strip, and of course in the West Bank as well. There seems to be little financial transparency, little will to find out where and how this money is spent, and how on earth it comes to be that it ends up in school books calling for incitement and hatred, and videos that we see of children in Gaza, in UNRWA schools, singing that they would love to kill Jews. It seems to me that anything that funds that should be utterly condemned.
Do you want to add something?
Yeah. I would like to add something. In the reaction of Joseph Borrell, where he says the suspension of the payments punishing all the Palestinian people would have damaged the European interests in the region. The European interests, not the Palestinians. So my question is, why do we need to, over the years, have to give the Palestinians money? Why? Can't they do anything by themselves? What I mean is, if an entity like Gaza Strip is able to produce rockets, can they not produce electricity? Can they not build hospitals? Far more easy. Rockets. So I think that the whole thing is like a big joke.
Thank you, Patricia. I want to add something and go much more into details to the questions that we were asked. First was, how do we comment on the statement released by Borrell? Well, the statement that he just released, and I quote that again, the suspension of payments punishing all the Palestinian people would have damaged the EU interests in the region and would have only further emboldened terrorists. Well, this statement proves once again that the reason why we are in this mess, not only Europe, but all across the globe, is because of these weak alleged leaders who are so weak that someone from outside is reading this, clearly can conclude that this guy has no clue what he's talking about. Because the reality on the ground that apparently he's avoiding and he's refusing to acknowledge is this. Books are printed and kids are taught from books where this terrorist, Dalal Maghrabi, who in 1978 killed almost 40 people, and this is presented as a role model to the future generation of adult Palestinians. So you tell me how this is in the best interest of Europe to finance something like this. Are we nuts? Are we nuts? Furthermore, we were asked what should be done or what EU could do. First thing, transparency. We just heard today in the conference, one of my colleagues, which is dealing more, a colleague from the Renew group. Now we start asking questions, what happened with the money? Well, it's 2023. Billions of euros from our citizens' pockets were given to this organization and implicitly to Hamas. And now we're asking after decades. Well, we want to see what happened with the money. That proves again how these alleged leaders, who I'm not denying, they clearly occupy a position of power. But these are not leaders. These are wicked people. Weak people. When you go in the Middle East, nobody's going to respect you if you're weak. That's the problem. If the Hezbollah or Hamas is reading this statement from Borrell, what do you think they are going to do? Will they ever respect you? If this guy would have worked for a private company, he should have been fired on the spot. And that's what we have to do. So the third thing that we have to do, first, accountability, transparency. The third thing that we have to do is put in power people who really know what to do with that power. Because you can do a lot of good things with power, but you also can do a lot of evil things. Directly or indirectly, through passivity, which is exactly what is happening here. And again, look at this picture. And imagine your kids, sending your kids to school, and instead of learning about Robert Schuman, for example, in Europe, and his idea about a community of countries that would respect each other and that would build peace through prosperity, you send your kid to school, and in the history book, in the literature book, in whatever geography book, they would be taught how to hate their neighbors. If you're a German, how to hate the French, and vice versa. We would have been in a constant war in Europe, even after the Second World War. This is proving once again how weak leaders are creating all these crises. It's proving once again what Borrell should not any longer be in this office. Thank you. Thank you so much.